Chief. Good morning, everyone. And as Chief has indicated, we'll have a continuation of last week's presentation. I just want to use about 5 minutes to just look at PPP procurement and contract management, and then we'll quickly move on to the case study for the day. So Chief, if you permit me, there are some few slides that it's good if we can quickly run through them.
Please go ahead. Please go ahead.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So with PPP procurement, we have the PPP Act, and it has provided for the procurement processes. And it says that the PPP procurement process shall be open, competitive, transparent, cost-effective, equitable, fair, and conducted in accordance with the Act. And it has recommended two-stage, either national or international competitive tendering, comprising of a request for qualification. So you will issue a request for qualification, and then you shortlist some firms, and then you will present to them the request for proposal for them to submit both their technical and their financial proposals. But there are some special characteristics about PPP tender. One, it requires adequate time for the bidders to be able to do due diligence and prepare very good bids. And so you need to normally best practices between 30 and then 120 days so that you could get good response, because they need to go to the ground and do due diligence. Then also you have to do interaction with the markets or bidders. In the traditional contract, we do pre-bid meeting, but this is quite extensive in PPP projects. Then the time for evaluation. Because PPP is quite complex, you don't just run through evaluation, so you don't give a week or two for PPP evaluation to be done. You give adequate time, and then because the people would have to have. And then you also need adequate time for the contract signature or commercial close. Normally, you need a longer period to allow the private partner as awardee to prepare signature. Preparation of signature means that the private partner, when they were tendering, it was a consortium, but they need to create a project company for the signature, for signing the actual contract. And the contract or the tendering period will normally give some time for the private company to be able to form the SPV that will sign the contract. Then PPP contract management. It's a process that enables parties in the contract to meet their respective obligations in order to deliver the objectives required from the contract. And this commences when you have reached financial close, or when financial close has been achieved. And what is financial close, or when is it achieved? It's when the financing documents have been signed and all the conditions precedent for the availability of the financing have been fulfilled by the private partner or the SPV. In some cases, the contract provides a limited time after contract signing in which the private partner must arrange for the financing and execute all the financial arrangements. But in other cases, these financial arrangements are done before the contract is awarded, and therefore the financial close can be reached just some few hours or days after the commercial close. Then the contract management spans the entire life of the agreement. So I think last week I spoke about the fact that PPPs are long-term, and you can have between 25 to 30 years. And so if you are talking about contract management, it means you are going to manage the contract throughout this entire period. And therefore, it requires good working relationship between the two parties, which should continue throughout the term of the project. So we will look at a typical basic structure of a PPP. So with a PPP structure, you would have what we call the contracting authority, which will sign the contract with the SPV or the private partner. And that is what we call the upstream contract. And the private partner will have its own loan agreements or financial arrangements with their lenders, and then their equity investors who are the shareholders of the SPV. And then we have the downstream contract where the private partner is engaging the EPC contractor, the contractor who will do the construction, and would also engage the operation and maintenance contractor. And if it's a user pays PPP, you have the user sitting at the corner there. When the project is ready and operation begins, they would have to pay their user charges to the SPV. During the construction, it's the responsibility of the SPV to pay the the EPC contractor. So this is what the basic PPP structure looks like. Then because PPP is a long term, you really have to establish a very good management structure. And so you need to appoint a contract manager or management team in the implementing agency, define their roles, and then if there are other government agencies involved, for instance, Ministry of Finance or AG, you also would have to define their roles and responsibilities in the contract management manual. And it also requires establishing communication protocols for relationship with the private party. And succession plan for PPP contract management is very key. Because the contract is a long term, the people beginning will not be there throughout the life of the project. And so you need to have a succession plan where people understudy them. When they move out, they also move in so that there is a continuity of the project. You don't have break, or you don't have somebody come in with no idea of the project. And in some jurisdictions, we have what we call the independent engineer, who sits between the contracting entity and the SPV or the private partner. And his role is for the certification of the works in compliance with the contract, as well as issuing the commencement certificate for the operations phase, and the rights of the private partner to collect or receive revenue from government. And normally this independent engineer is jointly appointed by the contracting authority and the SPV. And the company should be with the appropriate expertise and reputation for fairness and impartiality, and must be beyond the influence of each party. In most jurisdictions, the independent engineer is paid by the private party. And so if you don't get a company that is impartial, it means they may be supporting or moving along with they will be too fair to the private party. And so that is why it is important that the company's reputation in terms of fairness and impartiality is very important for you to consider when you are engaging an independent engineer. Then at the end of the concession period or term, the private company has to exit and hand back the assets to you. So governments would have to make provisions for that. And so the contract must provide for the expected conditions of the project assets on expiry of the agreement, and must be agreed with the private party. And so, for instance, if it's a road project, you may have a residual life for a number of years, let's say 5 years, 3 years, 8 years. And so you have to ensure that you achieve this residual life. And how do you check whether your assets would even have that residual life? When do you start the checking? Do you start on during the year you are going to take over, or 3 years earlier, so that you ensure that whatever interventions and remedies that will have to be put in place is done for you to get your assets back as was stipulated in the contract? And then it also has to define how the quality of the asset will be assessed. How are you going to do the assessment? Whether a payment will be made on assets handover, and how the amount of any payment would be determined. So the contract must clearly state all this. Then the public party must also decide whether at the end of the contract, they are going to continue themselves. So if government, if it's GHA is going to take over and continue the operation of the asset itself, or it's going to engage another private party after the expiration of the previous one to continue. So all this would have to be clearly put in a strategy so that you would have a continuity of the operation of the assets. So we will move on to our case study, and that is the Akyaa Payne and Extensions project. And that is our first road PPP in Ghana. And so we all know about the motorway, about 19.5 kilometers. And then it was opened in 1964. So this year, the motorway is 60 years. And it was designed, the design was intended for 20 years. And as I said, this year is 60 years. So of course, the road has outlived its terminal level of serviceability and requires construction. What are the problems? So we have inadequate maintenance of the road, and this leads to high or increased vehicle operating costs. You can see from the pictures on your right, fatigue cracking, joint failures, and when you drive under the fuel loads. Then there is traffic jam during peak hours. You have unauthorized accesses, which have been created for people to enter and exit the motorway, and this is creating a lot of safety problems. You have dangerous driver behavior. There are illegal U-turns, poor enforcement of traffic regulations. You see abobo yards on the road and all that. The absence of public transport facilities and pedestrian crossing facilities. The land use along the motorway has changed. And now when you drive on it, you see our popular trotros parking anywhere, stopping anywhere. People are crossing the highway or the motorway at any point, which is very risky. And this has increased the number of accidents, especially with pedestrian-related accidents. So how do we want the new expressway to be? So the project is to provide a level of service that will ensure free flow of traffic through the Accra Tema motorway section. That's the 19.5 kilometers. Tetekwashi interchange towards Apenkwa with full access control. Then the level of service is to ensure 100 km/h speed on the Accra Tema motorway section, and this is considered optimum. And so when we have done the identification and selection, we needed to prepare the project. And so the preparation phase started with the engagement of a transaction advisor. We went through procurement and Michelle's Routing International in association with St. Anne's Development Limited, that's a Ghanaian firm, won, and we signed an agreement with them in August 2016 for them to prepare the projects for tendering and then all the remaining processes. So the TA undertook a pre-feasibility study and a feasibility study in accordance with the National PPP Policy 2011 and the draft PPP bill. At that time, the act hadn't been passed. And so we had a draft bill in Parliament and provided advisory services for the procurement of the project, including preparing all necessary documentation. And they were also supposed to advise on contract negotiations as well. So this map gives an idea of the project location. And so you have the Tetekwashi interchange all the way to Ashaman interchange. So on the main motorway, the project will terminate just before the Ashaman interchange. And then for us to be able to achieve the required level of service, we needed to treat some bottlenecks or put in some interventions on some of the sections so that we can achieve our high level of service. And so we are looking at also at from Tetekwashi to Apenkwa interchange, and from Apenkwa interchange all the way to New Plan. And so we believe that when all these interventions are done, we'll be able to achieve the level of service that we want. So with the additions, we have our project scope. Yes, I must indicate that in our earlier project preparation, from Ashama roundabout to Afaroa was part. That is on the N2 towards Akosobubo. But government had a project in ZAC, so that link was taken out. And so we now have a scope of 27.7 kilometers, and it's organized into 3 sections. So the section 1 is the Accra Tema motorway itself between Tetekwashi and then west of Tema. That is just before the Ashaman interchange, which is the 19.5 kilometers. Then we have the second section, or section 2, which is on the George Walker Bush Highway, so on the N1. between Tetekwashi interchange to Apenkwa interchange, and it's about 5.7 kilometers. And we have the section 3 on the N6, that's the Nsawam Road from Apenkwa interchange to New Plan interchange, a total of 27.7 kilometers. And so from the feasibility studies done, the TA did a lot of option analysis and came out with this recommendation that for us to achieve the required level of service, the N6, the cross section should be 2x2 with an urban highway of 2x3, and that will give us a start level of service of B, and then end level of service, that's after the concession period, to be E. And then on the George Walker Bush motorway, we have a 2x3 highway, and we should be looking at an urban highway of also 2x3 to give us a level of service, a start level of service of A, and then an end level of service D for the freeway, and then B and E for the urban highway, or popularly called the service lanes. Then we have the motorway itself. We maintain the expressway 2x2, and then add urban highway 2x3 to be able to achieve a level of service A, that's the free flow level of service at the start, and then a D at the end. And for the urban highway, A at start and E at the end. So just for the motorway itself, we're looking at the current scope of, as I said earlier, 2x2 expressway to be maintained, to be still in the rigid pavement as it is currently, with the 2x3 urban highway in asphalt. We're looking at interchanges at Station Link, Community 18, and then Lashibi. We are also looking at remodeling the Tetekwashi interchange. So the SPV, or the concessionaire, is supposed to remodel the Tetekwashi interchange so that we don't have traffic bottlenecks there. There's also going to be construction of footbridges and then toll plazas. Then for the sections 2 and 3. So for section 2, we're going to rehabilitate and widen the existing to 12 lanes. So already we have the 2x3, so an addition of 2x3 on the urban highway. And we have construction of an interchange at the Jolu Junction or the Fiesta Royal Junction. We have a number of footbridges and then toll plazas as well. And then on the section 3, which is Apenkwa to New Plan, we're going to rehabilitate the existing 6-lane divided highway with full access control for freeway. Then we'll reconstruct the Apenkwa interchange, rehabilitate the Achimota interchange, and construct a new interchange at New Plan Junction. So the project was procured as a design, build, finance, operate, and maintain project. We started with a publication of a specific procurement notice in the national and international dailies. 23 firms purchased the request for qualification. And then out of the 23, we had 9 firms that submitted their qualification information. We shortlisted 4 firms and issued them with a request for proposal dossier. So just to give an information on the firms, this table talks about the consortium, members of the consortium, their nominated subcontractors, and then the country from which the lead firm is coming from. So there is a list here. We have MPGA, Tema Road, Motor Angel, Energies Consortium, Power China Consortium, Vinci Highways Consortium. So 2 of the lead firms were from France, then we have 1 from China, and then 1 from Portugal. So out of the 4, 3 were shortlisted to submit their technical, out of the 4, 3 submitted their technical and financial proposals, but 1 wrote officially to withdraw their participation. We went through the evaluation and 2 firms qualified from the technical proposal stage to the financial proposal stage. And after going through the financial proposal, Motor Angel and Edges Consortium was recommended as the preferred bidder. Now we had negotiations. That is the next step, is to negotiate with the preferred bidder, which the government side formed 3 teams. That is the technical team, financial team, and legal team, to negotiate with the preferred bidder. However, after 5 months of negotiations, we were not reaching any, let me say, it was unsuccessful because especially with the financial, government expectation wasn't met, and therefore government took a strategic decision to assign the project to Ghana Infrastructure Investment Fund in line with Section 51 of the PPP Act. So GIF was mandated by GOG through MOF to provide a GIF-led PPP financing solution for the project, where maximum funds are raised from the market, but majority ownership of the project remains with GIF on behalf of the Ghanaian people. So GIF submitted a proposal, and their option was to phase the project's delivery. So we will first do the Section 1, and then upon completion, we move on to Sections 2 and 3. And their proposal included a funding using public funds for the construction of the Section 1, which is in the form of a VGF and gives equity in the project's company, and then for the construction of the Section 1. Now, I must indicate that this project during the preparation was supposed to be co-financed by government. So government was supposed to provide what we call the viability gap fund in the form of a grant. And normally this is required when the project is financially, is economically viable, but financially it is not. And so, especially for user pays PPPs. So governments, if the revenues are not going to be enough to pay back, government comes in to provide the grants to support. So this project was in that form because the projected revenues was not really going to make the project financially viable. And so if government is going to provide this VGF, in fact, during the negotiation, it came out that government needed to provide more than 50% of the capital expenditure costs. And so that amount, government could give it to give for the construction of the first section, while there's Sections 2 and 3, give goes to the market, to their lenders to mobilize the necessary project finance to complete the remaining sections. So GHA therefore concluded negotiations with GIF, and the concession agreement was approved by Parliament. So GIF had to establish an SPV, that is a special purpose vehicle, specifically for the projects, called AT Expressway Limited, and it is 100% owned by GIF, and they are supposed to raise the funding and also manage the concession. The concession agreement was signed between GOG and was signed between the GOG represented by MRH and acting through GHA, and then AT Expressway Limited for a 30-year concession period in March. So the concession agreement was signed just last month. So the contracting authority now is to make the right of way available without encumbrance for the execution of the project, so that the SPV can quickly start their construction work. So just some few highlights of the concession agreement. The project will be delivered in phases corresponding with 3 sections as follows. The phase 1, as I've indicated, that is the Akyaa Payne motorway, then the George Walker Bush side, that is between Tetequashie and Apenkwan, and then the Apenkwan new plan section as phase 3. Then the CapEx for phase section 1 to be disbursed in 3 tranches. So I indicated that the section 1 is going to be funded through public funds. And the Ministry of Finance have indicated that they are disbursing in 3 tranches. So the first tranche was approved in the 2023 budget. And the second tranche will be given in 2024 and 2025 respectively. And so for the 2023 budget, a provision of $125 million has been made and approved by Parliament. So GIF has incorporated a wholly owned subsidiary. GIF SPV is a wholly owned subsidiary of GIF, and they are acting as a concessionaire. That is the AT Expressway Limited. Now, the concession agreement provides for a concession fee, that's an annual fee to be paid by the concessionaire to GH, equivalent to not less than 1% of the project's annual gross revenue, as set out in the section 15, of the concession agreement. Then the concession period from the signing date to the end date is the 30th anniversary. So that is the 30 years concession period. Now the concessionaire is allowed to charge, collect, enjoy, and retain for its own account any and all other income and revenues derived from the project facilities, which are not project activities or their commercial exploitations, including any revenues from advertising, hoardings, boards, and signages on the project. So since we have given the corridor to them as a concession, any business within, any advertisements within, if they put in on a side attraction that will generate income, that's all the income they will go to the concessionaire. Then the concessionaire has the obligation, the financing is obligation of the concessionaire. They are supposed to raise all the necessary financing and read the financial close. So as for section 1, it's been raised, government's public funds. And they are also supposed to liaise with their cooperate with their lenders for debts or for financing of the remaining 2 sections. So last week there was a question on the project structure for this project. So we have the government of Ghana, and GIF is also, let me say, a government-owned institution. So GIF is also under GOG. And so GOG is providing equity and the VGF to GIF. GIF has formed the project company, that is the GIF SPV, the Expressway Limited. Now GHMRH has signed the concession with the GIF SPV. So that's all these are all upstream contracts. Now, Expressway Limited or GIF SPV is supposed to engage the downstream contracts, engage their own EPC contractor, and also engage the O&M contractor. Now, utility relocation is the responsibility of the contracting authority, since they are supposed to hand over the site without encumbrances. So we are responsible for relocation. Yeah. So this is the typical structure for the motorway project. And if you look at the typical PPP basic structure I showed earlier, you don't not have too much difference. It follows the same, just that in this case, the concessionaire is also, let's say, GIF is also a government institution, which the law allows that when we are not successful with competitive tendering, we can go through GIF to procure the projects, the PPP projects. So I want to say a very big thank you, and this is the end of the presentation. Thank you very much.